in making that happen. We are taking questions from viewers from around the world, and I'm going to turn to my colleague Nick, who is in our Stockholm studio, who has a question from you from somebody tweeting in.
Yeah, hello. Thanks very much indeed, Shweta. There's like a whole ton of questions coming through on a certain issue, which I just want to kind of wrap up together, really. And this is really the question on, before the Paris Agreement and in the years running up to the Paris Agreement, there was a lot of strong statements by military from the United States, from Australia, from the UK, from NATO, even I think the Indian military as well. That voice seems to have been quite quiet recently. Is there a reason for that, Sherry? What do you think is going on there?
Well, thank you, Nick, for that question, because I would like to tell you the story of the new International Military Council on Climate and Security, which was formed last year. It's over 30 nations' militaries represented now in it. I co-lead that effort with the former Dutch Chief of Defense, General Tom Mittendorp. He and I and military leaders from 30 countries now released the very first World Climate Security Report earlier this year in Munich at the Munich Security Conference. And so this is a first annual effort to mobilize military leaders on global climate security.
Fantastic. Great. Love to hear more about it. Thank you.
It's one of many things that is underway with the work that Sherry does. She is also an expert on the Arctic, and we'd love for you to share with our viewers a little bit about what we're learning as the planet warms and what it means for the Arctic and our relationship with other nation states up in that region.
Well, thank you very much. The Arctic is warming faster than any other part of the planet. The sea ice is retreating, the permafrost is collapsing, and temperatures are rising. We've seen record warm temperatures, and increasingly the Arctic is navigable. Russia plans a toll road across its northern sea route where it hopes to reroute shipping instead of moving through Asia and the Middle East across the Russian Arctic from ports in Asia to Europe. China is building its Polar Silk Road, an extension of the Belt and Road Initiative, hoping to ship from Shanghai to Hamburg. We have many changes occurring in the region at this time. And it's one where, because of climate change, we now see growing geostrategic competition of increasing urgent importance.
I wanted to highlight that as an example because it really is a global issue that a lot of, especially Americans, don't necessarily perceive. And that's been some of the difficulty that communicators and those who have been working on this concept of responsibility to prepare. We have the science, we have more knowledge than ever, and that is power. And that can really give us that proactive preparedness to get ahead of some of these geopolitical conflicts that potentially are in the horizon for us. And so how have you used examples like the Arctic and others to really make the story and the case and this narrative really hit home for those who potentially might be resistant to hearing that this is a very real threat and this is a security threat? Using that concept in itself is something that I think goes a long way for reaching some of the American public.
Well, right. One of the examples we use at the Center for Climate and Security and the Council on Strategic Risks is scenarios to give people a sense of what could actually happen. And this week, in addition to the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, we're also observing 10 years since the Deepwater Horizon Gulf spill. And that was the largest oil spill in American history. And so there have been a lot of lessons learned being shared online and in various forums on the Deepwater Horizon spill in the US this week. And one of the most important lessons is what you just say, the responsibility to prepare and prevent. And last year at the Center for Climate and Security, we conducted a scenario to look at the changing Arctic. What would happen if there is a shipping accident in the Bering Strait between the United States and Russia, where they are only 30 miles apart? What if there's an oil spill? What if there's an accident with a nuclear icebreaker? These are matters for which we are today unprepared. And sometimes we suffer from a failure of imagination because we failed to imagine how the pandemic could hit the country so hard, even though there had been a lot of preparation done by key organizations. The economic fallout of this pandemic, for example, has been beyond what even the most dedicated scenario planners had envisioned.
Yes, and we've talked about this informally quite a bit, and we see the parallels between COVID and climate change, really in terms of complacency when nothing is happening. It seems slow moving, it seems far away, despite the science knowledge being there and various expert communities making the effort to ensure that everything is put in place for not if, but when an impact of climate change hits, not if, but when we have an infectious disease outbreak. So I really appreciate you joining me to reinforce that message. We have more knowledge than we've ever had, and it gives us that propensity to be prepared better than we've ever had before. Sherry.
Exactly. And Sweat, I'd just like to finish perhaps with sharing with your audience that we also need to be prepared, and we need to put Americans and citizens around the world back to work. So one of the important concepts is a citizens' environmental and energy corps, modeled after the New Deal's Civilian Conservation Corps. And I think this is an important idea in the United States, perhaps elsewhere around the world, to enable public service to help us transform to a clean energy, low carbon economy by putting citizens to work in that industry as we make this transition. It's an exciting opportunity. I hope our youth and other activists will join and seize on this initiative, which we've put forth in some recent papers in the Hill. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sherry. We truly appreciate your contribution to this.
Thank you, Sweta.
Moving along, we are now bringing in a climate change reporter who is also the host of the Political Climate podcast. Her name is Julia Piper. Let's meet her now.
Meet Julia Piper. She covers the global clean energy transition on Green Tech Media and is host and producer for Political Climate, a bipartisan podcast on energy and environmental issues in America and around the world.
Julia, thank you so much for joining us today from California. So it's quite early for you. We appreciate this.
Happy to do it.
Thank you for joining us. So we've heard from a fabulous lineup of women today. That really wasn't necessarily planned, but it's how it turned out. We have women leaders at the governance level like Sherry Goodman and Christiana Figueres, and we have young women activists. You are a female reporter on climate. You cover a spectrum of issues, and you're also a fellow with me at the Atlantic Council, really focusing in on energy. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience? And really, a lot of the theme today has been this inequitable distribution of impacts and the impact on those who have been disenfranchised, minority groups, those more vulnerable. You've covered a lot of these stories. Please talk to us a little bit about it.
Yeah, thank you, Shweta. I really appreciate it. Thanks to We Don't Have Time. Yeah, I mean, I cover the energy transition, and I often notice that I'm still one of a few women in the room or on a panel, say. And so there's definitely a lack of diversity still, even in this emerging clean energy sector. It's been an issue in the legacy fossil fuel industry. And it's something that I think the clean energy economy writ large is going to have to think a lot about, because it's going to take the whole world literally to solve these issues. So we have to think about women voices, also people of color, people of lower income groups, everyone, in order to actually find climate solutions that work, because the circular economy won't succeed unless it's an inclusive economy. And so those are the kinds of stories I look to tell, and through the podcast and other outlets.
And that's really unique in that all the different various methods in which you bring these conversations, this discourse, and really allowing those who wouldn't get an opportunity to engage in these conversations directly to perhaps even be a fly on the wall. You've had conversations with world leaders and strategists and advocates, anyone who's a stakeholder, really. How do you think about telling the narrative? How do you decide what is the story and how to design the story for the audience that you are then communicating it to?
Well, I generally view the role of media to point out successes, but also point out failures to bring those diverse voices I just mentioned into the conversation. We often don't even do a good enough job of that, even if we're aware of it. So we really have to be intentional about it. And that is the role of the media writ large, is to raise up voices of people that aren't often heard from. And that also includes pointing out perspectives that may not be super comfortable. In our podcast, we have a bipartisan podcast, and we do not support climate denialism or anything like that, but we're trying to show that there are a range of opinions on what the solutions should be in that nitty-gritty, more niche area of climate policymaking. So that's something that I try to do in picking stories, is find who are the people in power or not, and how can we bring their voices into the conversation? Because again, it will take everyone to make this work. And if it's a small group of people, it'll only potentially remain in that community alone. So that's what I view the role of media as doing, and what we try to do with our podcast. And I actually just had a piece that ran in Huffington Post today on the solar industry's workforce diversity problem. It is doing a lot. It's trying to do better, but we need to point out that there's still a lot more work to be done. And even now, amid the coronavirus recovery, it's important to keep pushing on diversity in the workforce and in customers they serve, so that this industry can be successful in the long run.
Yes, and that's awesome. You do a fantastic job of reporting those stories and to really sharing it through various mediums. One that you just mentioned, your Political Climate podcast, that I will make a shameless plug for. It's fabulous, because you really do have that bipartisan approach and all the various perspectives while still staying true to the facts. And that's the point. It's evidence and it's science first. So what are your plans going forward as you think about developing out your communication efforts and strategy? And in particular, the Political Climate podcast, how do you hope to continue to, not just you as yourself, but also as a member of the larger media, to share the stories and to really bring light to the stories of those who might not have had an opportunity to get it out there otherwise?
Yeah, well, shameless plug for your session, for coming on our podcast and talking about the human behavioral elements of climate change and the response to coronavirus and the links there. Going forward, we're excited just later this month to have former Secretary of State John Kerry on to talk big, broad perspectives on how we move forward on climate change in these very difficult times. And just this week, we have a piece running in our Path to Zero series in partnership with the think tank Third Way about the African American community and climate and how they're engaging on those issues, what's important to them, and also in the context of coronavirus, as so much is right now, given that this community has been disproportionately affected by the illness itself. And so we look at that also through a climate lens. So a couple of good episodes coming up that I hope everyone will check out on everywhere they get podcasts. You can find Political Climate there.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. We really can't do this alone. We are talking about connecting not just from the top-down level, but from the bottom up, and the role of the media and how telling these stories and really encompassing the big picture, as well as to those on the ground every day that are working day in and day out to make the case that this is something that we are collectively in together. Our future is truly what we choose. And so throwback to Christiana's book. Thank you to Julia and the Political Climate podcast. And with that, I will send it back to Stockholm. Thank you very much here from Washington, D.C. on day 2, the circular economy.
Well, thank you so much, Jutta. That was a fantastic lineup of experts, all of them women. Very inspiring indeed. So now we're going to move on to the next section, and let's take a little break before that with a "We Don't Have Time" bumper. The next section, we have 2 more doers and thinkers with inspiring keynotes. And let's start off with Carina Borgström Hansson, a very experienced senior person from WWF.
Here is Carina Borgström Hansson, Senior Advisor for WWF. Her work focuses on mobilizing cities' climate action plans for holding global warming beneath the critical 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold and increasing cities' competence in consumption-based emissions.
Hi there, Carina. Great to see you.
Katarina.
Great to see you. We're very excited to have you with us on the program. So please continue with your presentation.
Great. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. So, in these uncertain times, it's extra important, of course, to begin with remembering the things we know. So, for example, we know our breaching of planetary boundaries has rapidly grown the risk of global ecosystem breakdown. We know that the threats against the planet's climate and biospheric integrity are already extremely severe. And to sum it up in rough footprint terms, we know it's not sustainable to live as if we had 1.75 planets, when in reality we only have one. We also know what we need to do, as highlighted in the Exponential roadmap. To prevent runaway climate change, we must cut global GHG emissions at least by half each decade onwards. And fossil fuels must stay in the ground, and emissions must shrink exponentially, while solutions must grow exponentially as well, if we are to build the future we really want. Now, good news is that there is no lack of solutions. The Exponential roadmap has presented sector-based trajectories, including 36 globally scalable solutions that would enable our first halving of emissions by 2030. The only thing missing is the political courage or the will among governments and businesses to speed up the required changes in the global system of production and consumption and really implement these solutions at scale. Let's talk a little about the basics of this production and consumption system. I think we're all aware that there can be no sustained production of things and services if nobody consumes them. And when talking about responsibilities for halving emissions, we need to look at these emissions both from a production and a consumption perspective. Emission accounting and comparison between nations usually take a production perspective on emissions. And this means the focus is on the production processes within the country, and therefore only emissions that are generated within the country are included. In contrast, a consumption perspective will look at, sorry, I just want to double check, am I showing my slides? Can we double check that my slides are being shown? Okay.
Karina, can you hear me?
Yeah.
They're not. You have not shared your slides, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I couldn't intervene before now. So if you
Okay,
can,
I'm
please
so
try
sorry.
to share the slides.
Yeah.
Great.
I think I'm sharing them now.
Just we can see them now, but just try to move on so they're at where you're at now.
Absolutely. I won't start from the beginning then. I'm really sorry.
We would have liked, but it's not possible due to the time. Thank you.
I will share
Continue.
them afterwards. Yeah. So what I wanted
please
to
put
say,
it on full screen. Full screen, please.
Okay, full screen. There we go.
It's not the right view. It's good now. It's good now. Great.
Yeah.
Please continue.
Okay. So when we talk about the responsibilities for halving emissions, we need to look at them both from a production and consumption perspective. And what I try to explain is that there's a difference between if you look at where the emissions happen, where things are produced, and then what it is that generate those emissions. And that's the difference between production-based and consumption-based emissions. Now, if we want to compare consumption-based and production-based emissions on a global level, we find that there's no difference, because on the global level, you can't consume more than what you produce. But when we compare consumption-based and production-based emissions for countries, we see a very interesting pattern, with consumption in some countries apparently driving emissions in other countries. So this map, that I hope you all see, shows the difference between consumption and production emissions normalized by per capita. And in some countries, typically in wealthy countries, consumption-based emissions are much higher than emissions from production. In a country like Sweden, for example, our emission accounts double when we count emissions from consumption. In other countries, emissions from production are much higher than the consumption-based emissions, because the things produced in these countries are mainly consumed elsewhere. So China is a well-known example here. And there's a reason why China has been called the factory of the world. But note the dark blue and the light blue, not dark blue color. That indicates that domestic consumption in China has begun to grow. And that is something consumption tends to do when income per capita grows. So rising income is key. And rising income and urbanization often go together. Accordingly, cities tend to have higher emissions from consumption than from production. And the megacity network C40 cities, they found in analysis of their nearly 100 member cities that while the average production-based emissions per citizen was 2.9 tons, the average consumption-based emissions per citizen was 4.5 tons. And the study also reveals that if no action is taken to counteract the trend, the average consumption-based emissions from C40 citizens will almost double by 2050. Now, much as our consumption-based emissions tend to grow with growing income, our overall ecological footprint also correlates with income. As a whole, as you know, humanity lives as if we had 1 3/4 of the planet. But as you see in this slide, the appropriation of the planet's production capacity is not equal. For example, if everyone lived like in the US, we need 5 planets to provide all the resources and absorb the carbon dioxide emissions. Now, what is it in our lifestyles that determine the size of our carbon footprint? Here, I list the major components, not in an order of magnitude, but in an order to remind us all that we need to think about how we live if we are to halve the global emissions by 2030. Transport emissions are higher for people who own and use cars for getting around. And flying is also a rapidly growing share of the carbon footprint of the global middle class. And you may know that with business as usual, aviation could represent 1/4 of the global carbon emissions by 2050. But using mass transit and cycling, electromobility, remote working and meetings, that can radically reduce the consumption-based emissions from transport. Now, emissions from housing increase when we build big and badly insulated dwellings that depend on fossil fuels for heating and cooling and electricity, while compact buildings in low carbon construction materials with high energy efficiency and default use and production of renewable energy will radically reduce those emissions. Then we come to investment. We consume financial services, and everyone with a bank account is more or less indirectly supporting fossil fuel exploration and extraction via the bank or pension fund and its lending and investment policies. So all carbon must stay in the ground. And this is why 100% divestment from fossil fuel is a crucial step, not only to reduce emissions from investment, but to make the future we want at all possible. Nutrition. The major culprit here is the growing share of animal products in our diets. And 1/3 of the food that is produced is also wasted on its way from farm to fork. Shifting towards healthy plant-based diets and cutting food waste, those are essential measures to reduce those emissions, and at the same time a win-win-win, as it would simultaneously improve human health and reduce the pressure on this planet's biodiversity and scarce land and fresh water. Finally, consumption of stuff. There's a limit to how much you can eat, but the growth in stuff we buy and throw away seems unstoppable unless we decide to shift to a more sufficiency-oriented and circular economy that could greatly reduce emissions and demand for raw materials, and could also create new jobs in the recirculation and repair of materials and products. So, to halve emissions by 2030, we need to change both how we produce and consume, and we all have a role to play in speeding this up. Businesses will, of course, need to halve their own emissions directly as well as indirectly by influencing their value chains, but they also need to revisit their business model and design and scale products and services that cut emissions, both on the production and consumption side. And to survive, they will need to do all they can to engage both employees and consumers to become part of the solution instead of the problem. And we citizens do also have an important role. We're all consumers, and it's time to walk the talk, isn't it? For example, we need to choose bike over car, train over plane. We need to eat more plant-based and stop wasting food. And we need to tell our bank we want our savings to be invested in the future, not in fossil fuels. But we can't change the whole production and consumption system as consumers alone. And that's why we need to be active citizens and support ambitious and well-informed decisions by our governments, both on the national and local level. Governments are key actors in that they set the stage for the whole consumption and production game, where businesses, workers, and consumers interact. With rapidly growing ecological risk and vulnerabilities, we need clear targets, visions, and decisions, such as keeping carbon in the ground and rapidly scaling exponential roadmap solutions. Good news is that many local governments have already set out targets to transform their cities into places that enable both sustainable and attractive lifestyles, realizing the multiple benefits of job creation, better public health, resilience from investing in energy efficiency and renewable energy-based buildings, recycling, walkability, bikeability, and sustainable food production and consumption systems. Cities are important arenas for the transformation to the future we want. But leadership from national governments remains critical and urgent in these uncertain times. So before closing, let me go back to the corona crisis and how it has exposed both how biologically vulnerable we are and the importance of social justice and collaboration both within and between nations. And as any crisis, it has also reminded us what matters most to us and makes our life worth living. So it's important that our national governments integrate these experiences and lead a process of building back a more resilient and sustainable system of production and consumption. The Sustainable Development Goals provide important milestones here. And equally important is to remember the basic fact that our production and consumption system, or in other words, our economy, depends on the health and the integrity, both of our societies and the biosphere, which is the ultimate basis for our survival. Therefore, to enable us to build back better, our governments must deliver a new deal for people and nature, a deal that allows us all to thrive together. Thank you for listening and being part of this. Over.
Well, thank you very much, Carina Borgström Hansson. Let's see what questions we have gotten from the viewers on the app, Nick Nuttall from Earth Day.
Yes, we have some questions now because basically the service has been resumed after it appears as if Google pulled the plug on our broadcast sometime this afternoon, which was a bit of a shock. Anyway, people are back online again. Yeah, well, there's one question here from one viewer about the whole postponement of not only COP26, but the postponement of the biodiversity conference that was happening in China. What concerns do you have about the postponement of these two landmark meetings, conferences, which were supposed to push the agenda forward on both wildlife, biodiversity, species extinction, and climate change?
Well, I'm mostly concerned because we haven't stopped the destruction, and we are losing time. That's the issue. But at the same time, we are in another crisis, so we need to be very creative and use this pause and this opportunity, maybe also to reflect. And again, understand our biological vulnerability and really understand and listen to what the system is telling us so that we can enhance ambition as soon as it's possible to proceed and meet again. And of course, this conference is a perfect example of how we can actually continue working and allow a lot of people to participate in a debate and a discussion online. So let's use the time wisely. That's our hope, that everybody uses this collective experience to enhance ambition and try to catch up with the time lost.
Thank you very much, Carina. You stay on with us for the panel. We have a panel coming up. And we now continue with a segment with experts that would present their solutions, and then we have a discussion afterwards. Let's start with the first video.
Margustero leads the Finnish innovation fund Sitra Sustainable Everyday Life program, which creates solutions for societies to reduce climate emissions by changing people's everyday habits. These solutions allow every citizen to find their own way of living a sustainable, below 1.5 degree lifestyle. The solutions are also digital, open source, free and scalable to any country. More than 1 million Finns have taken Sitra's lifestyle test for tailored suggestions to improve their lives and lower their carbon emissions. As a result, 41% of Finns have changed the way they eat, live, move about and make purchases.
Hello there, 41%. That's pretty impressive. How do you plan to scale this even more?
Okay, pretty simple. All of the tools that we have created are open source, and we give them for free to anyone who wants to do the same type of program in their own country. At the moment, we have 6 different pilots that are starting around the world, where local teams are engaging their brothers and sisters in tackling climate change from everyday habits point of view.
So if you're watching this from another country, how do you access? Who do you contact if they want to use your ideas?
Google Sitra and my name, and we'll go from there.
I hope you'll be swamped.
Yes, I hope I will be. There's a team that will help me, so we are ready to get every country in the world going on this. And then we can actually produce a tremendous amount of CO2 reduction globally.
Well, thank you for your work. And stay on for the panel talk. We'll now move on to the next presentation, the next video.
Christian Möller-Holst is CEO and founder of Goodwings, with a vision to turn the hotel industry into a driving force for positive change within the framework of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Goodwings' business model is built on partnerships with diverse NGOs that work to create a more sustainable future. Instead of relying on traditional marketing, Goodwings' message is spread by those NGOs. The money saved on marketing is then given to the NGOs to fund their projects. Christian has found this unique business model has the potential to unlock $50 billion for climate change work every year.
So hello there, Christian. What you work with is very much related to the travel industry. How has your work been affected by the COVID virus?
I mean, we've been scaling for the last 6 months. We really hit the product market fit in 19, and we thought that March was going to be our breakthrough, and from there on start see the exponential growth. And at the moment, we have 0 turnover. So we need to take desperate measures to keep positive.
Well, you still look composed, so best of luck. And scaling after all this is, I mean, how can you change the way you work? Because there's no business as usual, going back to business as usual, of course, after this.
No, I mean, of course, everyone is wondering when is travel going to pick up, when are travel bans going to be lifted, and how are we going to travel? Are there going to be more governmental, intergovernmental restrictions on tracking? Where have you been? Which countries have you passed through, and etc. I think everyone appreciates that travel will pick up at some point, and post-corona and being in a time of economic crisis, I think everyone is aware that the fact that the sustainable transformation of the travel industry is going to be hit hard. So I believe that we are actually going to be quite well positioned post-corona, given the fact that we take the money from Google and other online platforms and put it into the money of the nonprofits who are on the ground and actually ensuring that we deliver on the 17 global goals. And that's going to be of great importance post-corona.
Well, thank you. And stay on for the panel talk. Let's move to the next video, next presentation of Kilian Kaminski.
This is Kilian Kaminski, founder and CEO of Refurbed, an online marketplace for refurbished electronics. 50 million tons of e-waste are discarded annually, and the production of new electronics is a massive factor contributing to pollution of the atmosphere. Refurb is out to change that. They have created a sustainable and affordable product category between new and used through rigorous quality controls, minimum 1-year warranty and 30-day test phase, as well as planting a tree for every sold product. Since Killian founded Refurb in 2017, the company has sold more than 150,000 refurbished electronics products and has successfully expanded from Austria into Germany, Italy and Poland.
Hi there, Killian. Great work you're doing. Please, just in a few sentences, explain the difference between used and refurbed in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I think the big problem is that the term used is always recognized on a really negative base for the most of the society. So we created an own category, which means that these products are completely tested in up to 40 steps from professional merchants, which check every single unit and of course reduce the footprint massively, because the product has been produced already and only these parts which do not work anymore are exchanged. So therefore we have a clearly less electronic waste, we have less CO2 emissions, which makes the product cheaper and more environmental friendly. In addition to it, you also get a warranty, which of course is extremely important nowadays regarding security.
Absolutely. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Let's bring back Carina to the panel and also the previous two speakers. Let's see if we can get them here on the screen. Wonderful. So Carina, after you've listened to Marco, Killian and Christian, what are your reflections on what they're doing?
Well, I find this extremely inspiring. And well, I have a lot of questions. Am I allowed to pose questions as well?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Because I like to learn more, really. So maybe beginning with Marcus, because I really like this type of initiatives, and I'm so amazed about the take up in Finnish society. And my question to you, based on your experience so far, would you say that the Finns will be able to halve their consumption-based emissions very soon as a people? And what additional measures, maybe by others than consumers, will be needed to speed this up? Considering that for equity reasons, while the world needs halving by 2030, like richer countries like your country and my country in Sweden will need to halve much quicker. So I'd love to hear your reflections there.
Excellent question. I'm happy to say and announce that this is totally doable in much faster fashion than 10 years to halve your emissions. So the first indications from people who've made a plan how they want to cut their personal carbon footprint show us numbers that the first year reduction plans and plans that have been completed have reduced 30% of an individual's carbon footprint. So if you can do first year 30% reduction, second year 30% reduction, you've already reduced 51% of your total carbon footprint. So this is totally doable, much faster than 10 years. The only thing we need to make sure of is that we spread this to a wider community than those who are currently looking at their individual choices from an ecological point of view. So how do we make this exciting, appealing to people who are maybe prioritizing other things than carbon or environmental matters? Marcus, and that's something that we are trying to tackle.
Marcus, may I add a question to that? Are you also targeting public institutions with this tool?
We are not. We are targeting directly individuals and citizens and what type of decisions they make Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and so forth. So how do we make sure that things that you can do and are in control of can, in a meaningful manner, contribute to fighting climate?
But you could, in an extended version, also be able to tweak what the public institutions are doing.
Definitely. So we can show the data so that options that people readily choose, what are those, and then options or behavior changes that people are not making. We can ask from citizens that what type of help do you need? Do you need new, easier products that will help you to pick up on the new behavior, or do you need maybe government support or some kind of stick or carrot so that you can more easily and readily change your behavior?
Great. More questions, Carina? Go ahead.
Yeah. So and it was very interesting also listening to Christian. And again, we have the COVID crisis, and I also think in terms of we overall we know there is a huge emissions abatement potential with remote working and meetings. So I'm sure you already thought about it, but would your network of hotels be interested in offering rooms and coordinated tech solutions for remote working and meetings as an alternative to long distance traveling? Because I know there are so many people now struggling with home office that is not a really viable option, and with less long distance travel, maybe this is one way of adapting a business model of some of the hotels to develop some kind of alternative offer. So I'm just curious to know your thoughts about this.
Well, really good question. I think the hotels that I have talked to, and remember that being an online travel platform, you don't partner directly with individual hotels. You basically, what you do is you partner with the big databases that can give you large volumes of inventory, because we have 1 million hotels on the platform. But the hotels that I have talked to, however, are looking into these opportunities. I know hotels in Copenhagen are doing it already. But I mean, to be honest, it's not economically sustainable for them to go down that road. It's a way of mitigating the crisis that they're in at the moment. I think what they're really waiting for is to get some tourists into the hotels. Also, some hotels in our part of the world have been used for as hospitals, and I mean, I think they want to turn the hotels back from hospitals and back to hotels. I think that's really what they're looking for.
Thank you. Karina, did you have a question to Kilian too?
Well, if I can go on, what I was thinking about there is, I just love this initiative, and it's such an important step for electronics. It's such a key issue. And we urgently need to close the loops of material here, and we can reduce emissions. And you're doing just a fantastic job. And I would love initiatives like yours to take a much bigger share of the market. So my question is, of course, based on your experience, what would be required for initiatives like yours to grow to a scale where you really enable a closing of the material loops from the electronics industry?
Thank you for that question. Kilian.
Yes. So I think, of course, it's extremely expensive to increase awareness. So for us, it's a lot about establishing this new condition category of refurbished product and refurbed instead of only used and new. So for us, it's all about marketing expenditures. So what we currently do, for example, in Germany and Austria, we have TV advertisement to just explaining them there is an option to buy sustainable electronic products by buying them refurbished instead of new. So that is an important part what we as a company can do. But of course, from the policymakers, from the government, there's a lot of potential, like as an example, doing tax cuts on refurbished products. In Sweden, you have it already with repairs, reduced taxes. And of course, you could also do this on refurbished products, so to promote them even more, to increase the companies which are doing the refurbishment, but on the same time to make it more attractive for customers to buy perfect working products in a sustainable way, and of course saving money. As Markus already mentioned as well, it's important to not only tackle this part of the society which already is environmental aware, but to tackle the majority of the society, which of course in a lot of people, the price is an important factor. And so refurbished products benefit in the sustainability and in the price, which makes it really rare.
Kilian, you talk about policy changes. Many of the public institutions, they have procurement rules. Could we weigh factors like yours with refurbed products, electronic products into procurement, and how could that be done?
Yeah, we, for example, we try to work this out with the Austrian government, as it's the closest to us, as we are based in Austria. For example, a great way would be that all of these procurements, they have to also ask for refurbished option for products, because right now they always choose new products and never even ask for the option of having a sustainable option. And the government should be the one which literally goes the first step and shows the rest of the society that they take it serious. Because normally also what we see on the European level with the Green Deal, everyone mentioned to promote refurbishment or promote circular economy, but on the same time, they still buy, for example, new products instead of buying refurbished products. And there we're talking about hundred thousands of notebooks, for example, hundred thousands of phones. So they could literally make a huge difference if they would start the whole process.
Well, we really, all of us, well, not all of us, because most of us working with the environment have recycled our electronics, but many people do have a mine in their drawer at home with all sorts of rare minerals, right? To be aware of. So, Killian and Marcus, and when you've looked at each other's products here, and also, of course, Christian, your solutions, how could you learn from each other? How could you share your common experiences in leveling up, scaling what you're doing? Any reflections from the three of you?
I mean, I see a lot of similarities between what Killian explained he's doing, which is really about explaining a new category. I think when it comes to travel, and especially online travel, no one really understands the value chain. I mean, as also from what I understood the question just earlier, do you talk to the hotels? Because of course, when you go to Goodwings and you see we have 1 million hotels, you expect us to be in a partnership with the hotels, but really we are not. We're partnering with one of many parts in this value chain, and that's really, we're trying to cut out the middlemen and create value. So I think Killian and I could probably share a lot of experiences about redefining the industry and creating value in new ways, and how you come about that in your communication and marketing efforts.
Thank you. Any more comments on the sharing of knowledge point?
Yeah, I mean, for example, I'm adding completely to Christian that it's important to also communicate within the industry, and even if it's different like niches, like for example traveling, as well as for us as electronic products, it's still the same course which we are trying to tackle the climate crisis and to do our part to make it to a better future, and also to give our children probably a world which is as nice as we can see today. But also, I think it's important from the policy side and the politics that they ask the experts as we are. For their feedback, and to include them in the process of establishing new laws, new enforcements, and so on, because we probably know the industry in this regard better than they do when they are based in Brussels. So I think this would be also a great help to ask more the experts of the specific industries, to bring the whole industry forward and to hold the whole sustainability.
Thank you. Carina, WWF is a major player in developing solutions and tools. Now you're using the Exponential roadmap. How can you as an organization reach even further into the minds of the consumers now when we really have to shift rapidly into a circular economy?
Yes, absolutely. We need to, every citizen needs to be reached. And I'd like to talk about us both as consumers and citizens, because we won't achieve the change alone or just by acting as consumers. We would like, and our model is to work in collaboration and try to convene different actors. As has been mentioned here, it's so important that, for example, the rule makers, the guys in governments that sets the stage for what's going to happen on the production and consumption stage, they need to be informed about people's concerns, and they need to understand what the businesses actually can do. That's one of the values of the Exponential roadmap. It demonstrates that we already have these 36 solutions ready to scale up. For the first halving, we don't even need any additional innovation. For the next halvings, we do. So this kind of brokering of between different actors in society is a role that we are taking on, and we can't do this alone. So that's why collaboration with many different actors is key. So together it's possible.
Well, thank you. And now you have 3 more friends to collaborate with. Well, thank you all of you in the panel. Thank you, Carina Borgström Hansson, for your work.
Thank you.
We're now moving in to the next segment. We're digging deeper into few more minds of doers and thinkers.
This is Isabella Palmgren. In 2017, she founded Mimbly, which innovates sustainable laundry products. and has created the Mimbox, an add-on water recycling system for laundry machines that recycles water, saves energy, and captures microplastic.
Hi there, Isabella. Great to have you with us. You have our attention.
Great to be here.
Yeah, just explain a little bit more about what you're doing, please.
Yes, I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see what we're doing. So, can you see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Yes, perfect. So as said, my name is Isabella Palmgren. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Mimbly, and we create sustainable laundry solutions. Because the truth is that 25% of the water in an average household goes towards laundry. All of this warm water is then released into the sewer filled with microplastics. These are tiny plastic particles that are released from your clothes when you do laundry. So from fleece, polyester, anything that's made out of plastic. And one wash can release 9 million of these tiny, tiny fibers. They go straight through the water treatment plants and end up in our oceans. And out of the microplastics in the oceans, 35% actually comes from laundry. They get eaten by plankton and fish, and then in the end by you and me. And we eat about 1 credit card worth of microfibers every single week. While at the same time, 5 billion people are experiencing water stress every year. And these are the 2 problems that we tackle at Mimbly: water shortage and microplastic pollution. We started our company by thinking about the question if we really need drinkable water to clean our clothes. And the answer is no, we need clean enough water to clean our clothes. So we developed a technology that we call the Mimbox. This is an add-on water recycling system for laundry machines. It attaches to any type of brand or size of machine, and we currently attached it to 2 machines at the same time to maximize the savings. So our customers are hotels, laundromats, apartment complexes with shared laundry rooms, and customers that do a lot of laundry. And we can show them in real time how much water and energy they're saving, but also how much money they're saving. This is what the Mimbox looks like today. So we save up to 70% of the water. This depends on what you wash and how dirty your laundry is. And we filter away the microplastics that are released from the clothes. And we save energy. We can save the energy by keeping the heat of the water inside of the system. Then we don't need to heat up the water as much for the next wash. So we can reuse both the water and the energy. So the Mimbox is attached to the laundry machines in between the wall and the machines. And all the water from the machines goes through the Mimbox. Here we filter all the water, regardless if we're going to reuse it or not. And then we analyze the water to determine the water quality. If the water quality falls outside of our parameters, we throw it into the sewer. But we still filter it for microplastics. And then if it's good enough to be recycled, we can store it inside of our system. Here we also have an antimicrobial system so that we can store the water for the next day or for the next wash or whenever you're going to wash again. And then when you're doing your next wash, you can take water that's either recycled or tap water if there's no water inside of the Mimbox anymore. And then we have these microfibers. So we have developed our own filter that we have that empties itself in a separate compartment. And this is what you see here, the microplastic compartment. And these microfibers you throw away in the trash. So we avoid getting them into the water mainstream again and traveling up the food chain. We have an amazing team today. We're based in Gothenburg, Sweden, and we come from Chalmers University of Technology. We closed an investment round now in the beginning of this year and are currently growing the team and growing the business as well. We are doing a big pilot now after the summer and have signed on 20 of the biggest real estate owners in the Nordics that are going to be a part of that. And we are launching the system next year, which is going to be great. But our purpose and our mission is to have as much impact as possible. And to be able to have this impact, we need to have a lot of systems out on the market. And when we have 30,000 systems out together with our customers, we will save 1,800 tons of microfibers from being released into the oceans. We will save 45 million cubic meters of water, 114 gigawatt hours of energy, which also corresponds to a lot of money for our customers. And we compensate for 47,000 tons of CO2. And this is what we want to do in the big picture. Because the truth is that we have a growing population, our consumption continues to increase, and our water consumption continues to increase. But gray water also continues to increase. So this is a resource that we really should take advantage of because it contains both energy and water, which saves you a lot of money, saves the environment. That's good for everyone. So if you're interested, please visit our website, contact us, and I hope to hear from you soon.
Well, thank you very much, Isabella. Impressive numbers you're cranking there. Really, really impressive. So you're focused very much on user-centered products and also the economic incentives. Why is that?
Yes, because most of the customers won't make a bad investment. They could do a ±0 investment for sustainability reasons, but you still need to have a return of investment on the products. We believe to be able to sell many products and to be able to have a big impact and reach everyone.
Well, best of luck scaling your fabulous work. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next guest is actually in the studio, but we will start with an introduction and then move over to a video.
Johan, who leads sustainability and corporate responsibility at Rentzhog, a European leader in waste management, environmental services and recycling. He's also deeply involved in creating environmental targets for Sweden's sea and coastal regions and creating Sweden's industry roadmap for net zero emissions by 2045.
And now we're going to see a video of the work that this person is initiating.
Normally, bin lorries start their journey empty, pick up waste and return to the depot full. And delivery lorries with all those parcels we love start their journey full, drop off the parcels and return to the depot empty. But all these journeys are clogging up our cities. So what if we combine the two jobs? That's what's happening in Stockholm, Sweden.
Normalt så är det här två separata flöden, avfall och gods. Det vi gör i älskade stadsamarbetet är att slå ihop de här två flödena till ett, som gör att vi kan hantera både gods och avfall.
People fixing the world.
At the depot, Simon's loading his trunk with the day's deliveries. Then he takes them to homes and businesses around the city centre. But instead of coming back empty, he picks up the recycling.
So we go full in and full out with parcels and waste.
It's part of a plan to cut emissions and make the city nicer to live in.
We have more and more people and freight that need to move around on our streets. And at the same time, we want to use our streets in another way, focus more on people and pedestrians.
So a parcel company pays a waste company to do the final leg of the delivery.
Ni har sett ett samarbete som går över gränser med olika företag som normalt inte jobbar med varandra. Det har varit ekonomiskt lönsamt från dag ett utan några tillskott stödpengar från andra håll.
As a result, 3 bin lorries and 3 delivery lorries have been decommissioned and replaced by electric vehicles. The waste company says this has cut its CO2 emissions by 74%. But to really solve the problem, should we all order fewer parcels?
I think people in general need to be more aware of the negative impact on their local environment when they buy something online. So maybe perhaps people should stop buying 3 sweaters and send 2 of them back and being more aware of the transport that's actually generated.
Welcome to the studio, Pelle och Hans. Great to have you here. Profitable from day one, no subsidies. This could be scalable. How could you scale this to other sectors, cities, other regions, even other countries? We have lots of people watching.
We have already opened up this also in Norway, 2 cities, and another city in Sweden, Malmö. And so the interest is high from a lot of cities now. And we started this collaboration in 2017. So it's really going good. And I think that's the reason why we are profitable. It's for real. It doesn't need subsidies.
And it's sort of a very strange collaboration when you look at it, waste and new goods. What sort of resistance has that evoked when you started trying to put these sectors together?
This is a question of trust, and Bring, as the parcel deliverer, they really trust, especially with Erik, the man of the movie. He was the one that really they met in the first place, and so by creating trust between the company or between the companies, we said don't compete, let's collaborate instead. And I think collaboration will be a key enabler and must for creating circularity going forward. And this is one example where we said, don't do this as ask for having the lowest cost. Let's do something together that create value for both companies.
You're also working with some other circular systems in Rentzhog, getting waste nutrients back into the system. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yes, in 1881, the family company was founded, and this was one 1881. So this we are now in third generation.
We're very circular.
And this was he was supposed to emigrate to US in 1881, so he borrowed money for a horse and started to transport goods and people in and out of Stockholm. The thing was that it was a bad buy because the horse died after just a couple of months. So he couldn't emigrate to US. But the next year, in 1882, he borrowed more money, bought a second horse, and then the company bloomed, and he didn't need to go to US. So then after another 15 years, we became the biggest transport company in Stockholm with horses. At that time, he also took packages or products into the city of Stockholm and brought out litter,
So this was done already a long time ago.
Exactly, and that was the starting point where we also brought nutrients back to the land. Tomorrow, or in the future, we will bring back nutrients, but then we would use chemical engineering instead. So we will do it in large scale, and now we're going to target the global arena. But we'll come back on Thursday and talk more about that.
Well, we need to know a little bit more.
All right. What we talk about, we have innovations how to recycle phosphorus, potassium, and also nitrogen, and do it in a chemical way. So it means that we don't need to bypass the atmosphere and create emissions. So it's really all of the processes are carbon sinks. But I started with this one man, 1881, that had an idea of creating value. And now we are 6.4 billion Swedish crowns in interest in 4 countries, but we have now started to open up in another 2 countries also.
Well, wonderful work. It'll be exciting to follow this idea with the nutrients. Thanks for coming to the studio, Per Larssons for Rentzhog, and best of luck.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Thank you. We're now moving on to another solution, another great example.
This is Vari McClement. She helped launch the Good On You app, which rates clothing brands on their environmental, human, and animal rights impacts. She is also a former journalist and a climate activist in Australia.
Well, let's now listen to a pre-recorded video with Vari.
Hi, my name is Vari McClement. I'm from Good On You. Good On You is our world-leading source of trusted brand ratings on fashion. And what we do is look at fashion's impact on people, animals, and the environment. So we know that fashion has a huge impact on the climate. We don't exactly know how much of an impact it is, but it's been estimated at around 10% of emissions come from the fashion industry. And fashion also touches on a lot of industries. That's, agriculture, transport, as well as the supply chains in fashion itself. So it really is a massive global industry with a huge impact on the climate. So what do we do at Good On You? Well, we rate fashion brands for the impact in 3 areas: people, planet, and animals. When it comes to the planet, we look at carbon emissions, and we look at what people are doing in their supply chains to reduce carbon emissions, because the supply chain is one of the biggest sources of emissions for fashion brands. And we also look at things like sourcing renewable energy, and whether or not a brand has set targets to reduce their emissions. This is the Good On You app. You can look up a brand and find out what it's saying about how it's tackling the environmental issues around fashion, whether it's set targets to reduce its emissions or not. And you can compare brands with other brands to see which ones are doing best. And we have a rating system which scores brands out of 5 for each of the areas that we look at, and then gives an overall score as well. So that's for consumers when they're looking to buy from brands that do the right thing by the environment. For brands themselves, it can be very difficult to actually measure emissions. And if you're not measuring emissions, then you can't really set targets to reduce them. So we produced this. This is the climate change toolkit for fashion brands. It's a 6-step guide on how to reduce your emissions, how to measure them first, and what parameters to set and how to get started with that. And it breaks it down through scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and really gives a kind of walkthrough guide for fashion brands to reduce their emissions. So what can we do as people, as ordinary consumers, people who wear clothes ourselves to reduce our fashion impact? Well, the biggest thing that we can all do is to make our clothes last longer. Study after study shows that we are buying more clothes, wearing them for less amount of time than we used to maybe 20 years ago. This is generating a huge amount of waste and using a huge amount of resources to produce these clothes. So just making your clothes last longer and therefore buying fewer clothes is one of the biggest things that we can do. When you do need to buy new clothes, you can always pick up the app and have a look at what the brand says it's doing about the planet, so you can be sure when you're buying clothes that you're buying from brands that really are addressing these issues. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Vari, for your important work. And this is really a sector where there's much room for improvement indeed. We're now moving on to another fantastic guest. Let's see the introduction.
Meet Ursula de Castro, a designer and internationally recognized opinion leader in sustainable fashion. In 2013, Ursula founded the global sustainable fashion campaign Fashion Revolution, which now has a participation from over 70 countries.
Thank you for joining us, Ursula. We're all ears.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know Fashion Revolution, we believe in an industry that conserves and restores the environment and that values people over profit. We were born as a result of the Rana Plaza disaster in 2013. Some of you may recognize our first hashtag, Who Made My Clothes, which has been used over 1 million times on Instagram since inception. We started really talking about transparency and public disclosures from brands, but always with a mission to incrementally dig deeper into the complicated topics that the fashion supply chain presents us. And so in 2017, we started looking at mass consumption, mass production, and the accelerated burden of accelerated disposal. We launched another hashtag called Loved Clothes Last, and really started to communicate with our audience around longevity of clothing. And as the previous speaker from Good On You was saying, making clothes last longer. However, it is just as important that we citizens learn ways to prolong the life of our clothing, learning about our responsibility in the second half of the value chain of clothing. But it's just as important to ensure that we scrutinize brands when it comes to their waste management practices throughout their fashion supply chain, when it comes to their pre-consumer waste, and when it comes to the unsold garments that they store. And what we've been doing since we launched the Fashion Transparency Index, our 6th edition is launching today. You can find it on the Fashion Revolution website, is to ensure that we also look at how much brands disclose around their waste management practices and what they're actually doing to halt this problem, which is huge. We believe that it is imperative that we move towards a circular economy, but at the same time, a circular economy in itself and circularity in itself, it's not enough unless it is coupled with the usage of innovative materials and ensuring that the people who make our clothes are allowed to organize and unionize, and unless we enter a culture, a future where we look at quality before we look at quantity. And what I mean by quality is not just quality of product, but it's also the quality of the lives of the people that are making this product. We believe that we need to disinvest in growth in order to invest in supply chain prosperity and abundance. And that really the future is an industry that is more efficient, more connected, and radically transparent. We know for a fact when it comes to circularity, in particular chemical circularity and recycling, that we are nowhere near where we need to be. There is massive investment, and there are some brilliant organizations that are beginning to really explore what this will be. But the reality is that according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we are only really recycling 1% fiber to fiber. And considering that this is an industry that produces approximately 150 billion garments per year, we know that this is not enough. We know that we cannot wait that long, that serious measures need to be taken now in order to redress the balance between consumption and disposal. This industry is as inefficient as it is wasteful. And if anything, what we are learning during this COVID crisis is the huge inventory problem that we will face once we are out of here. And hopefully, although I'm not necessarily optimistic that we will move towards a more mindful consumption immediately, I do believe that there is the potential to turn all of this waste, all of these unwanted products into new jobs, new descriptions. I believe that we will need to marry technology with creativity and with common sense, and to really start from the very beginning, and that is education, to ensure that the generations of tomorrow, the young designers of tomorrow, have a very different attitude towards consuming and disposing, creating the systems that we will need so that citizens can really become a part of the solution. As I mentioned before, the minute we take ownership of a piece of clothing, we are responsible for the rest of its life. I don't necessarily believe that we need to impose or demand strict adhering for individuals to be learning how to mend and learning how to fix. I think it's important if it's voluntary, but it's just as important that we ensure that it is our councils, our cities that provide mending facilities for those of us who can't, maybe with 4 children, come home at night and start darning a pair of jeans. So this is very much what Fashion Revolution does, trying to put together all the dots and ensuring that we have contents and suggestions for our audience, but also for the policymakers, the academics, and the governments and the organizations who can really, really make a difference. This is a strange Fashion Revolution week for us. We always come together during the anniversary of the Rana Plaza and campaign with our global hubs. And obviously things are very different this year. We're online and it's, there is a very different vibe. But what we are hoping to achieve, at least for those who can, is to take the time and interrogate our own wardrobes. What are you made of? What can I do to make you last a long time? What are the components that this piece of clothing is made of? That's also incredibly important to know. It's a knowledge that will determine how people buy. The more we know that blended fabrics cannot be recycled, the more we will question whether we should buy something which is disposable and made of blended fibers. The more we know that polyester, for instance, releases microfibers when we wash it, the more we might be careful in the way that we treat it once we own it. So we see a whole connection in between everybody working together to make this a fairer fashion industry. And I guess what is important for me is that I don't really believe that this is an opportunity. I believe that this is an obligation. If there is one thing that we are learning from COVID is that nature is rejoicing. Cities are less polluted and we can hear, birds singing and fishes are back into rivers. All of this while we're simultaneously witnessing the suffering of so many people, all the vulnerables in our communities losing jobs and losing opportunities. So I hope that we will emerge collectively out of this with a heightened sense of empathy for our closest and nearest, for the people who make our clothes, and respect for the natural resources of the earth and the environment that we all share. I'm going to read the Fashion Revolution's Point 6 manifesto. You can find the full manifesto on our website. But number 6, which is dedicated to Earth Day, is fashion conserves and restores the environment. It does not deplete precious resources, degrade our soil, pollute our air and water, nor harm our health. Fashion protects the welfare of all living things and safeguards our diverse ecosystem. When it comes to our clothing, considering where they end up with, it's just as important as knowing where they come from. I'm going to leave you with 2 quotes that were very influential in my professional and personal life. The first one is from Laurent Antoine de Lavoisier. He is the father of modern chemistry. And he said, "In nature, nothing is created and nothing is destroyed, but everything is transformed." And the second one is from Joan Crawford. And it said, "Care for your clothes like the good friends they are." Thank you for inviting me to speak, and I hope you will keep on following Fashion Revolution Week for the next few days.
Well, thank you so much, Ursula de Castro. Fantastic work you've been doing for now more than 7 years with the Fashion Revolution. Thank you so much for joining in. I have a question to you. Do you think it's enough that the consumers, that we do this transformation, or do we need support from decision makers, politicians in terms of taxes, other regulations?
Absolutely. I mean, this is really not something that consumers and citizens can do on their own. There is not one sector of society that is responsible for change. It's all sectors of societies working together. So it has to be the governments that legislates, the brands that become radically transparent so that we can create a culture of vigilance and scrutiny, because this is what consumers need. If you don't know what the issue is, you can't campaign, you can't inform yourself, and ultimately you cannot make informed decisions. So this is why we need to all cooperate together in order to come out of this situation and find better solutions.
Thank you. With me here on the stage, I have Nick Nuttall. What questions do we have from the viewers?
Yes, Ursula, hi, lovely to see you. So there's one question here from Johannes, and I suppose it's a pretty straightforward question, but not so easy maybe to answer. Which large fashion company or brand do you think has come longest and furthest on the path towards sustainable fashion? And thanks very much for your speech.
Thank you. Well, you know what? I don't really believe that there is anyone that's doing any better than anybody else at the very top layer. I mean, you can see our Fashion Transparency Index. We will only comment on what brands publicly disclose, but we can't really know at the end of the day of, fully their practices, because the industry is so disconnected. Fashion Revolution has a unique attitude in the sense that we don't name and shame brands, but we don't necessarily thank them either. So my answer for you here is we need to look towards the smaller businesses. We need to look towards the emerging designers. We need to look towards those nimble houses and organizations and people who can embed ethics and sustainability and innovation from the very start. This is something that I hope to see in the very near future. I hope to see a slowing down of those brands that are producing billions, that are somehow taking too much space in our high streets, in order to give room to multiple creative and different solutions. Somebody inspired me by telling me that in nature, nature doesn't upscale very well, but it replicates. So in a future where we are more in tune with nature, that's what I would like to see. More replication of smaller, successful brands. If I could make a little bit of advertising, we launched our initiative, Fashion Open Studio, www.fashionopenstudio.com. And you can see so many of these brands from India to South America to Europe to, all over the world, really coming up with incredible solutions. Those are the ones that have gone the furthest for me.
Well, thank you so much, Ursula de Castro, for being with us and sharing your insights. Wonderful work you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now moving on to look at two young women and their journey.
Meet Moa Berglund, a student of recycling design and upcycling. Moa has a strong engagement in environmental movements. She talks about slow fashion practices, slow travel, and upcycling to inspire people to be a part of a positive transition. This is Agata Pucciato. She cycled from Alaska to Panama, connecting with people and learning about culture and nature, an adventure that ultimately led her to her current studies in recycled design.
And now let's look at the video from these two wonderful women. Hi.
Hello.
You're here.
Yes.
I thought you were supposed to see a video, but we're going to talk to you first. That's great. Yes. So tell us a little bit more about your journey. What brought you onto this?
Well, yeah. So my name is Moa, and my name is Agata. So we study recycled design in Sweden. At Rentzhog, it's the world's first upcycling mall that is open in Sweden. And we had an idea of learning as much as possible during our internship. So we decided to research, but we couldn't find one spot. There were so many interesting places to learn about. So yeah, we decided to do a little, interrail trip.
Yes, and we call that trip Reunite the Future. And what we did during the trip was visiting inspiring communities and companies that promotes a sustainable approach, learning from their work and spreading what they are doing to create more positivity and hope in the world. So we've been back in Sweden for 1 month now, and now we will show you 2 of the places that we went to, and we hope to inspire you.
Go ahead. Let's look at your video.
One of our first stops on the trip was the Danish island Bornholm. We read that the whole island was going to go zero waste 2032. Mm-hmm. They want to show the way of a future without waste. That caught our interest, and we contacted BUFA, that's a waste management on the island.
So we met up with David, who showed us around the island and explained how they plan to accomplish this goal. Their vision of a zero-waste island is ambitious and said. It is very inspiring, as we have not heard of any other region who have put a brave and necessary goal like this.
And what is inspiring is that they might not have an answer for everything, but the goal is far more important than that. They are all the time looking for solutions, since they're going to close down the incineration part.
By engaging the citizens through workshops at the existing hub for circularity called Möbelfabriken, they want to create awareness and find new innovations as a community on the island. We left the island and took the trains further south and ended up in Portugal, where we went to the community Aldeia do Vale.
This fantastic community is inspiration for future societies. We met up with Sylvia, who is one of the founders of Aldeia do Vale. The Village in the Valley is a project that is working on teaching and spreading permaculture, mimicking nature and teaching how it works.
Simply creating soil that is fertile and gives a healthy environment for vegetables and people to be around. To fight the toxic in the ground that is made by human power. We need to learn from Aldeia do Vale to make permaculture to something ordinary in our everyday lives.
We often want to change the world with big projects, and one of the things that we've learned during these days at the farm is the importance of starting with your own community, as well as giving back to nature, a true sustainable community.
Aldea do Vale are taking a percentage of the money earned from the courses to spend on local produce for more sustainability. They have been planting at schools and elderly homes. The power of giving back to people in the community, not only through sustainability, but to engage and get people to connect.
Great job, Moa and Agata. Wonderful to see your video. So what is the most important thing that you have learned during these journeys?
I think it is that because we were really spontaneous during the trip, and we let the people that we met like help us, and we asked a lot of people like, okay, what do you think about, or what inspires you, and do you have any recommendation or where we can go in this city? And that made the journey so beautiful.
And what we also learned that there's so many places and so many companies and communities that are actually doing good for the environment, for the world, that are inspiring. There's more out there than we think there is. And I think, like as often media portrays like a picture, you think, oh, nothing's happening in my town. But there is actually, I think, more to it than you think.
What can we as individuals do better? I mean, what have you been inspired from an individual perspective in these 2 journeys that you've done?
I think do small things and start with your own community. I don't think it has to be rather big things. I think start with talking to your neighbor, or like the little things that we can do around us. I think that's what inspired.
And also to learn from each other and hear about projects that has been or has happened before, so you can learn from their story and their work and maybe do the same thing if it's a good thing.
Well, thank you, Moa and Agata, for sharing your optimism. It's been very, very inspiring to listen to you, and keep up your wonderful work. Thank you. Well, it's time to conclude. It's a fantastic second day, isn't it, Ingmar? But we had some glitches. What happened? Tell us.
Actually, YouTube shut us down in the middle of Christiana Figueres' speech.
Oh dear.
Our content about the climate crisis is too dangerous and harmful and violating the YouTube rules. We don't know exactly what it was, but something was it. And I think this is very strange that you have this company that tells people what they are allowed to watch and what not. It's censorship, actually. And what is more strange is that if you go to YouTube, you will find millions of conspiracy theories, flat Earth society, and a lot of stuff. So I think this is exactly why we need a new social media where you can speak truth to power about the climate and what's needed and done. And we're going to show you that in our short film.
Do you want to act on the climate crisis but don't know how? With our app, you can send climate reviews to organizations and leaders. Our team reaches out to the organization to encourage dialogue. Just download We Don't Have Time. Tap the green Create button and choose Type of Review. Give climate love to people doing great stuff. Create a climate idea to suggest a solution. Or send a climate warning to those who hurt the planet. To increase your impact, you can share the review, because when enough people agree with you, organizations and leaders will change. Many even want your opinion, because we have to work together. Do you want to be part of the solution?
Nick, what has been your key takeaways from today? You've been taking a lot of questions. There's big interest in this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole concept of the circular economy, which, as we were saying at the beginning of the show, goes back many, many, many years, and there have been other terms too, like ecological society and all kinds of things. There's still obviously a long way to go, and that's absolutely clear. I mean, listening to Ursula, for example, talking about fashion and what connects us more than our clothes and our food, these are two areas that it's still pitifully low in terms of what actually is going on. I think the other thing I learned, if I don't mind just saying, is this whole business of it's absurd, wouldn't it, that Google would disconnect a program on climate change. I mean, you know, the fact is the whole world has agreed that, in fact, we need to act on climate change. And yet, you know, some people still think it's a political issue. This has to be beyond politics. You know, the science is absolutely clear. This is about survival, and you can't play with this. You can debate whether it's going to be renewable energy or whether it's going to be, you know, saving your forests. What is the mechanism you need to deal with climate change? But not the issue itself. This is absolutely absurd.
It's pitiful.
Yeah.
Johan, Falk, what has been your main takeaways from today?
I think we've seen a lot of examples of fantastic innovation, you know, in clothing, in materials, and so on. And we have a lot of focus on shifting the energy transition to renewable energy, and we need to give circular economy just the same focus. It's just as important. And to cut emissions, we talk about cutting emissions by 50% in 10 years, also from materials and from the industry. We think that is achievable, that the solutions are there, but we need to get much stronger focus and start scaling these innovations. And our society is so wasteful, so we think there is an opportunity. In a lot of industries, we waste possibly more than 90%. So it's better both from an economical viewpoint and for the climate.
Absolutely.
The opportunity is there. We've seen that.
How could we scale and push? I mean, the circular economy even quicker into society. What do we need? What do we need, Nick and Johan?
I think we need a political framework which is much stronger in all countries and from a European level, actually moving away from the waste economy to the circular economy. That's absolutely critical. That should be part of the new Green Deal, for example, in Europe. Secondly, we need businesses, a critical mass of businesses actually stepping up and shifting their business models to become circular instead of wasteful. But also we need to contribute as citizens and consumers to actually drive the demand of these products, as we saw examples. From Marcus, for example, I mean, we as consumers in the rich world can pretty easily cut our emissions by 50% in less than 2 years by just shifting consumption, conscious choice.
That's very hopeful.
Yes.
Well, much has been very hopeful today. And let's thank the viewers, and let's thank all the experts and the panelists and all the wonderful people that have been on the show. Tomorrow we are back with another program. We'll focus tomorrow on big ideas and education. And please stay with us now for a reused song. We are playing a video and music, a song, and it's a special thanks to the arranger, Nasreen Alamin from Surge, Africa, for this Nigerian cover of the We Don't Have Time song. Thank you for today. Bye-bye.
There's a distant sound, closer, soon it's all around. Hear me, time is running out. Come on, tell them what it's all about. We're running out of time, we're running out of air. We gotta keep it clean, show me that you care. Wherever you are, you got to wake up. United as a nation. We don't have time. there's a world to say. Right or wrong, how will you behave?